Welcome to another episode of Magna Meets. So far on Magna Meets, we've had many property developers, we've had software companies, we've had agents, mortgage brokers, but for the first time, we've got an IFA. The Themoneyman, also known as the Erling Haaland of IFAs, Ian Dempsey. And I can't tell you how happy I am to have this guest on the podcast. I came across Ian on LinkedIn, and it hit me that everything that he was writing about, I was agreeing with. It's relatable and easy to consume financial information. He has a way of making what may appear complex and daunting really simple. So I reached out to Ian on two levels. One, to handle my personal affairs, and the other, to join me today. Ian, welcome to the podcast.
What an intro, eh?
I do try. How are you?
Yeah, all good.
Look, it's great to have you on.
It's good to be on.
And there's a lot to discuss. And for the viewers watching, if you haven't done so already, it'd be amazing if you could like, share, and subscribe. But also, if you want more information on the services that Ian provides, the information will be in the box below. Ian, talk to us about how you got to this point today.
Do you want the short-potted one, or do you want the full in-depth story?
Go in depth.
Right, so never ever want to be a financial advisor, like we were just talking off air. Never want to do it. It just wasn't on the agenda. And accidentally kind of fell into financial services. My dad was a IFA and my mum was a mortgage broker, so I've been around that environment my whole life. But just, I remember as a kid from school going to my dad's office and I'd be like, this is pretty boring, isn't it?
Yeah, you try and fight it, don't you?
It's just like filing cabinets everywhere and they've all got a grey suit on and it stinks of coffee and like one of them smoking there was cigarettes and I'm like, nah, that's not what I want to do. And then similar to you, started off in telesales, like worked in telesales, came down south from Newcastle, kind of worked in various telesales jobs, couple of promotions, and me and the ex-wife at the time decided, let's go back to Newcastle, let's give it a go up there, we can get a property for like half of what we're going to pay for it down here. Went up there, got a job, and then didn't work, so I came back down, fell into a job in financial services and just went from there. Like, they put me through my mortgage qualification. I really started enjoying it. I loved the technical element of it, but rapidly found as a mortgage advisor in a bank that I wasn't earning the money. And the thing that got me, there was a financial advisor in the branch who would come in a nice car, have a nice suit. They'd never be there when the branch opened at 8:30 in the morning. They'd kind of leave at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd be like, I want a bit of that.
Yeah.
So I started having a chat with them and I'm like, how much do you earn? And they were like open about it and they told me how much it meant. I'm like, that's like 3-4 times what I earn at the minute. I'm like, right, I want to do that. So did my qualifications, then worked my way through the banking world, worked for a couple of the big corporates outside of banking, fell out of love with financial services and just felt like there was one more roll in the dice, and that was be completely independent and do it on my own. And then over lockdown, the opportunity came up to do it, and I just grabbed it with both hands and just jumped in and kind of developed to where I am now.
It's incredible how many people have transitioned into new roles and found new paths because of lockdown, because of COVID.
Oh man, it was a massive eye opener for me, and I'm kind of, the thing that really changed for me was I had a lot of time on my hands. I was employed at the time, and the business that I worked for said, like most businesses did at the time, think it's only going to be a couple of months. Don't worry, look after your family. Everything's going to be fine. And having been through a few redundancies before, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, we're going to get made redundant.
Yeah.
It's common.
Yeah.
Writings on the wall. So I said to me boss, I'm like, we're going to get made redundant. He's like, no, we're not. Everything's fine. We're a big company. Don't worry about it. I'm like, I'm not risking it. I've got kids, mortgage to pay and all the rest of it. So just really got into social media. Got into LinkedIn, hired a coach, started kind of experimenting with it and just really found my feet on there, which is like took me from being really scared of being self-employed to and social media and thinking like, I can remember when I did the coaching session with her, she was like, it's all about personal brand. And I'm like, I'm from the financial world, what's personal brand got to do with it? I'm like, what a load of crap, that's not me.
Yeah.
But she just kept pushing. She was like, just write a post, just write some stuff, just get going. And I did. And I'm thinking, well, what am I going to post? Because I kind of Instagram and Facebook, I'm like, I've had beans on toast for me breakfast and we're going to put that on there. Do you know what I mean? And it was completely foreign to me. I felt so uncomfortable doing it.
Yeah.
But over time, I just got more and more comfortable with it and thought, actually, people don't want to know about what I've had for me breakfast. They want to know a little bit about me before they then really dig into the technical stuff about financial planning and where I can get to and the journey I can kind of take them on.
Yeah. And what did you feel that you wanted to do very differently to the old way of financial advice?
Oh man, everything. Like from start to finish. I just think, having been in the industry for 17 years, I think there's a lot of the industry that just doesn't work, in my opinion. And the tide's slowly starting to turn. Like there's been some massive transformations in the industry in the time that I've been in it. But I think transactional advice where you just sit down and you've got a financial advisor in front of you, nice suit, nice car, talks about a brochure that's the company they work for and how great they are. And I used to be part of that, right? I used to do that every day and I did it pretty well. And then you go through this process where they talk about numbers, and at the end of it, the client gets a bill, sets up a pension or whatever else. Right, great, see you in 12 months' time. And that was how I'd been trained. But like I said before, you off air, I just felt like it was really boring.
Yeah.
It was boring for a client, but they didn't have any other alternative, and it was really boring for me. And it got to a point where I was like, I was doing that like 10 to 15 times a week, and I was getting to the end of the week, and I'm like, you could have, and it was a real light bulb moment. It was like, you could have a chimpanzee do this. It's that whole thing about you put like the load of monkeys in a room, and eventually the type that works as Shakespeare kind of thing. And I was like, you could do that. And I just felt like I've got to figure out how to do this differently. So spent a lot of time kind of working on myself over lockdown. It was reading books, it was doing courses, it was mindset, it was everything, and just pulled my whole process to bits and flipped it all on its head. And now, rather than talk about numbers, I talk about the client.
Yeah.
Like, what's important to you? Like, what do you want to get out of life? Like a life coach more than anything else. And a lot of that came from having a couple of coaches. And I'm thinking, like, all we've done is talked over like 3 months with this coach once a week. And look at what's brought out of me. And did that a few times with a few different people, and then thought, I could be doing this with clients and getting a better outcome than the vast majority of people. And the other part of it, like selfishly, I thought, if I'm doing that with a client, why would they want to go anywhere else?
Absolutely.
Why would they want to talk to John Smith down the road who's got the brochure and the nice car when I'm doing such a great job here?
And do you know what? I put it down to the fact that you're likable from the time that I've known you. And I think it's so underrated in any industry. And there's a misconception, certainly in business, you don't have to be liked. But I think you do. You wouldn't tolerate being in a relationship when you don't like the other person. So why would you tolerate it in business? And I think certainly when you're looking at things on a long-term basis, which always bears the best fruit.
Yep.
I think any relationships that you have longer term in business always produces the best results rather than chopping and changing. And certainly from the guests that I've had on the podcast so far, there's a recurring theme, which is loyalty, relationships, partnerships that can stand the test of time.
And that's a massive part of it. And that's the whole personal brand. It's like, I'm unapologetically me. Like, you see me like this is how I am with
and
clients.
you're not going to engage with everyone.
No.
And that's just the reality of life.
Yeah.
So that's okay.
And that's hard because I've had to unlearn that after like 17 years. Well, 15 years in that kind of corporate space where it's like sell to everybody. And it's just like...
it's stats. Why didn't you get that client? What did you do wrong? When in reality, it's like nothing.
And it's like you've got to sell to everybody. And like sometimes I'll be in the banking world, I'll be sat in front of like a little old granny who's got like 35 grand in savings, all the money in the world. And it's an observed interview and you've got your boss in the corner and he's like, why didn't you sell to her? And I'm like, are you for real?
It's too intense.
Like, you expect me to sell a stocks and shares investment? That's the wrong thing to do. And ultimately, it bred the wrong behaviours, and that kind of backfired massively in the banking crisis, right? But, like, you've got to be able to relate to people. And I'd like to think that all of the clients that I look after now, I could quite happily go for a beer with.
Yeah.
And sit in a pub, have a beer, talk about whatever. And most of my clients now... our reviews are very different. It's just like we are now. Sat on a sofa, having a chat, maybe out in the garden. That's it. It's not the old formal approach, but like make a few notes, kind of download all the information, store it all in your brain, get back, write it all up. Like that's what clients want.
So tell me, what is the role of an IFA? What do IFAs typically do?
Great question. And I think it varies like massively. I think when you kind of look at like independent financial advisor, independent means that you've got access to everything that's out there in the whole of the market. Financial advice is, in its simple terms, historically has been based around solutions and products, pensions, investments, life insurance, tax efficient investment schemes, all that kind of stuff. But like for me, I think the value is the planning. So the a lot of financial advice is just transactional, so it's just product driven. Like, I'll sit you down, we'll go through this, and there you go, there's a pension, thanks very much, like that old school approach. But like financial planning is the important bit. It's how do we get you from A to Z as quickly as possible with a few bumps along the road, and it's not going to be a linear line. We might go left, right, up, down, and all over the place. And what can we put into place to make sure we get you there? To hold you accountable, hold me accountable. And I think that planning piece is so powerful. And it's missed out by a lot of people. But the tides are turning. There's a lot of financial planners and a lot of incredible people coming through the system now that are doing this. And there's not enough of them. Like, I think the whole industry will change massively, but like ultimately, you should be a coach, you should be a planner, and you should be an advisor. And if you can do all three and do all three of them well, you've got a phenomenal career ahead of you in financial services. But I think when you come in and you get started, you do all these qualifications about advice, and it feels so technical, but you forget about the relationship stuff.
Yeah.
You forget about how to talk to people. You forget about, because you've got all this stuff kind of going through your head, and you've got to do all the legal requirements and all, and you forget about
the emotions,
the journeys, and like money's such an emotive thing, right? Everybody's got a relationship with money. We all have, good, bad, indifferent, or whatever. Emotions are attached to that, and they're incredibly powerful. But what I've learned to do over the years is take those emotions away when I need to with a client, and then apply them in the right places. And if you can do that, it makes a massive difference. Like some of the feedback I've had from clients, and blow me on trumpet for a little bit, it's just been incredible. Like, this is life-changing stuff. And some of those clients have never even paid for advice. It's just helping people, you know what I mean? And that's what I want to do. I want to help people get from A to B and plan, coach, and advise.
You know, we know most of the time it's the right thing to do, but having that a voice in your ear sometimes saying, look, this is what you need to do, and this is what you shouldn't do, and here are some steps, and speak to me next week and I'll follow up with you. It's so powerful, but so simple.
Yeah.
And you know, you've had it yourself to get to where you are. So
of course,
you know, if you can have it and you're also advising clients, then you know it should be open to everyone, surely.
Yeah. And I've made all the mistakes. I've done them all. Like I've been in debt up to my eyeballs. I was going to say I've had kids young. That wasn't a mistake. That's the wrong way to
the
put it.
truth's
Like,
coming out. The truth always comes out.
Like I've got 4 kids, you know, and at times financially it's bloody tough.
Yeah.
Like I've been there, I've walked that walk, and I think being relatable, like you said earlier. But like analogy I use with clients is like, imagine your life and the amount of energy you've got in a day is 6 egg cups, right? And to get from the start of the day to the end of the day, you expend all 6 of those egg cups. So let's say you've got 2 for your job, you've got 2 for your kids. You've got to do your exercise, take the dog for a walk, spend time with your partner, clean the house. All that other stuff's got to fit into those 2 other egg cups. So when you've filled those egg cups or you've drained them, whichever way you want to look at it, then you've got to think about your finances as well. Then you've got to think about all this other stuff that you should be doing. That's right. Tough.
Yep.
Now, if you then look at it for somebody who's maybe got mental health struggles or they've got physical struggles and they're using 4 of those cups just to get out of bed in the morning, they've got to try and squeeze it into the other 2 egg cups. Like for me, it's about not taking the egg cup away from them, but it's taking the contents of the egg cup and saying, well, look, I've got an egg cup that I'm going to use to kind of give you all that other stuff back. And if you can do that, it means that you've got someone you trust looking after you, doing the right thing, who's not afraid to challenge you back and giving you like all the tools and the time, which is the most important thing for you to crack on and do what you're good at.
And there are pitfalls in any industry, but your job really is to minimize those pitfalls. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, like, some of the time you can't help but fall into them. And when I worked in the banking world, I thought it was all about the money. And I had the nice car, I had a brand new Mercedes, I had the nice suit, I had the nice watch, I did everything that I thought I should do to be successful. So then when I went self-employed, it was like, it's all about the money. And I think I said to you when we spoke before, like, my first 3 months of being self-employed were consecutively the best 3 months I ever had. One after the other. And the money just came flooding in lockdown when everybody's kind of focusing on this stuff. So it was a bit of a bubble. But I got to the end of that and thought, like, what have I given up on these last 3 months to get that level of money? And it was literally, I'd give up everything. I was starting work at 7 o'clock in the morning. I was working 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. I was working on Saturday. I was working on a Sunday. Like, the kids were coming in and they were like, what's for tea? And I'm like, you're going to have to make something for yourself. The missus was kind of doing more of that as well. And it was just like, the money's there, but then it was a real light bulb moment. And you get those with clients, like that light bulb moment, just something clicked. And I thought, do I really want to give all that up? just to have a bit more money, and it was no. And that's when I realized it was about something else. It's about helping people, and that's what kind of really got me going.
What are some of the most expensive mistakes people make?
Oh, number one, not starting early enough.
Right.
Simple as that. Like, and I get it, right? Because the last thing you want to be thinking about when you're 18, 19, 20 is starting a pension. Like, really? But like in my experience of 17 years and looking for every single walk of life, from people that haven't got a pot to piss into like multi-millionaires, the ones that retire early are the ones that started early without fail. Like, start early. If you start early and just like put your money into a pension, encourage your kids to do the same, talk to your kids about money, find out about money, learn about this stuff, it makes such a difference. Like 50 quid a month when you're like 18 isn't a lot of money, but like when you compound that over the next 40, 50 years,
Makes a difference.
it's a monster. And when you start in your 30s or you start in your 40s, and the reality check is most people hit the panic button in the 40s. That's where the vast majority of my clients come from. Every single one of them says, I wish I'd started sooner. Everyone.
Quick earners. You know, if you know, I'm sure you get asked this a lot. You know, you're on a night out. You know, you meet people. It's Ian. You know, give me some top tips. What could I do to sort of make a difference now?
It's terrible when I've had a beer though, because I go right down a rabbit hole. I'm sitting like chewing someone's ear off about investments for like an hour and a half in a pub, and I'm like, I get back on, like, why have I done that? But yeah, like some real quick earners for everybody. It's like, I'm a big fan of the phrase "think with ink."
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, like, think about what you really want to get out of your life, not money. Like, what do you want to get out of your life? Like, what does your life look like ideally if everything dropped into place in 5 or 10 years' time? And the first question I ever ask a client when I sit down with them is, what do you want to get out of this process? And why is that important to you? And if the answer's not quite what I think it is, or I can see it, they've just kind of get a lip service, and they all do the same thing. I want to be financially free. I want to have all this. I want to make sure I've got a comfortable life. And I'm like, what does that look like?
I think the right answer is.
Absolutely. And I'm like, what does that look like? And it's just silence. And managing that silence is really important. I think that's one of the things that we don't do well enough. Like, just keep digging. And eventually the answer comes out. I'm like, that's what you want to get out of the process. So figure out what you want to get out of life. Think with ink. Write it down. Like, write down what it is, no matter what that is. And that might just be something really simple, like, I just want to start my savings journey. Like, write down what you want to achieve out of life. And if everything dropped into place over the next 5, 10 or 15 years, what would your life look like? Why is that important to you? And what's that mean? And then jump to the end of that life, look back and think, how would you feel if everything dropped into place? And that's something I ask every client, because that's really powerful, because you're building the journey. And what you're doing is, you've got the starting point, you've got the end point, and my kind of role and their role is to just bridge that gap and figure out how we do it. And I think that's so important. If it's something like you want to get out of debt, like, write it all down. Don't put it on a spreadsheet. Don't put it on like a Word document, sit on your laptop, pen and paper, old school, write this stuff down. And it does a couple of things, because it engages your brain differently as well, because there was a great quote from a guy called Jim Rohn, who said something along the lines of, like, show me somebody who hasn't written the goals down and I bet you I can guess their bank balance. Which is incredible, right? Because actually, by writing this stuff down, you're bringing it into reality. By talking to somebody about it, you're bringing it into reality. And sometimes when I have conversations with clients, it's the first time they've had that conversation with anybody else. And like, even like husband and wives are sat there and I'm like, you never told me that. And like, you never told me that. But it's the first time they've had that conversation as well. Like, these people have been married for like
because
15,
you've dug deep.
Yeah, 15, 20 years of marriage, and they've never had this conversation about what to do. But it's like, it's have a plan. And that plan doesn't have to be rigid. And the hard thing is, like, and I'll use this and get everybody to think about this, is like, think about what your life's been like over the last couple of years. Like, who could have predicted a pandemic? Who could have predicted everything that's happened? The challenges, the whole world has changed massively. So how can you predict what's going to happen in 5 years' time? You can't. But you could have a North Star in the sky and think, that's what I'm going to aim towards. And then all you've got to do is take the next step. And then the one after that, the one after that, and one after that. And it's figuring out what that next step is to move that dial forward. And the big thing is, and what the most successful people do, is they know what every pound does. Get it to work. Like, whether you earn £1,000 a month or whether you earn 20 grand a month, like, understand what each pound does and where you're going to put that to work.
Well, I wanted to ask, so I want to run through a case study with you, or I want to run through a scenario with you. I earn £2,000 a month.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I know you're shooting in the dark. You don't know where that money goes. But what would be the simple steps, and you'd say the sort of non-negotiables in how I manage that money? What would you say?
Get a sheet of paper, write down what you've got coming in, write down what you've got going out, and split it into 2 lists. So your essentials, so what you need to survive. So that is like your mortgage, your rent, your council tax, your gas, your electricity, your food bill, all the stuff that you need to survive. That's your survive list. On the right-hand side, write down everything else. That's your thrive list. So what is extra on top of that?
So your gym memberships, things like that?
You just get real clarity around that. And if everything on there you think is important to you, keep it. If it's not, try and get rid of it or try and reduce it. And that's one of the things that we don't do, is we don't sit down and review stuff regularly. Like, everybody says renew your car insurance. When your car insurance comes down, or your house insurance, sit down, find a better quote. Vast majority of people don't.
Yeah.
Check your gas and electricity, check your direct debits. Like,
It's bothering to do these things.
Absolutely. And companies make millions, if not billions of pounds on us not doing that. Like, why should someone else have your money because you couldn't be bothered to spend 5 minutes doing that stuff? And just go through that, go through the list and figure out what you've got left. And sometimes you go through that and you'll be in a position where there's nothing left. Or you're overspending on a credit card. That's okay. Because the reality is that's the situation in you right now. And you've got to kind of face the reality of, that's where I am right now. What do I want to happen next? Right. But it starts at a fundamental level of kind of breaking down what you've got coming in and going out. And if you've got a grasp of that, you can get a grasp of everything else, whether that's £1 million a month coming in or whether that's the £2,000 a month coming in.
Right.
It's got to be your starting point.
So knowing the start in terms of organising what's coming in, what's going out, and then cutting off what's not necessary. And then what would you do with any potential surplus, any remaining funds, or the stuff that you cut off?
Yeah.
Where would you allocate that?
Dead simple. So you need to make sure you've got an emergency fund to fall back on. We talk about this, every financial advisor and financial services talk about this, whether you watch commentators in the press, whether you see people on social media, they all talk about that emergency fund. And that emergency fund serves a couple of purposes. Typically, 3 to 6 months what you spend every month. So work out what your survive list is. If that's 1,500 quid, 3 times that or 6 times that, that's your emergency fund. Priority number 1.
Where would you put that? In a completely separate account, for
savings account, accessible. If you can get a return on it without any risk, great, do it, but don't lock it away. And the idea is, if it hit the fan tomorrow, you can put your card in a machine, take the money out, buy yourself a new washing machine, pay for a roof repair, whatever it is. It's accessible. And it means that if you do that, and then you decide that you want to invest long term and markets go down, which, let's be honest, is what's happened recently, you don't panic. You don't panic and think, oh my God, all my money's gone down, I've lost 20%. What you sit there and think is it's gone down 20%, but that'll come back, because it always does. But it means that you've got this money short term to be able to kind of use if you need to.
Fine. And then I'm, say, 30. I'm a little bit older than that, but let's say around number.
Wishful thinking.
I'm 30 years of age.
We can use some camera tricks on that or something. Come on.
And I start now.
Yeah.
And I'm putting away £500 a month. Where does that money go? What are the types of returns that I can expect? Am I investing and forgetting about it, or can I depend on any sort of return?
It depends on what you want to get. Okay. Like if you're saving for a deposit on a house, then you've got a set goal and something that you want to work towards. If you've got something you're working towards in the next 5 years, taking risk with it, that means stock market investments or anything that can go up and down, is probably a bad move. Okay. And the reason I say that is, put you in the position. Let's just say in 5 years' time, you've saved up 30 grand for a deposit on a house. You're not going to get a house for that. But there you go. Yeah. Let's call it 50 grand. Okay. Yeah. So you got 50 grand ready to go. You found the dream house. Day before you're about to withdraw your deposit, markets tank 20%.
Right.
You've lost 20% of your deposit like that.
And you've seen that happen?
I've seen markets do that. The clients that I've looked after, I've never seen that happen because it's not the right thing to do. Right. But it could happen. So what happens then? Can you buy that house?
Absolutely not, yeah.
Can you go to the mortgage broker and say, I'm really sorry, but we can't get that house? Is there any chance we could get any home? And they'd be like, well, not really, because you're at your maximum amount anyway. Like, that's tough. So if you've got something you're doing in 5 years, put that in a savings account, try to get a better return. Anything over 5 years, that could be invested. And by that, I'm talking about stock market investments. That could be funds. That could be individual shares. That could be pensions. That could be a combination of a few different things. And if you don't know, find yourself a financial advisor and have a conversation with them. It just gives you that clarity to put those options on the table to be able to say, that's for me, that's not for me. I really like the idea of that, but not now.
Yeah. You're trying to identify what that person's makeup and tolerance is before you can say, this is what you should do. This is because it's not a one shoe fits all. And I think that's important.
It's not at all. And I think that's the danger of a lot of financial services. It's kind of square peg, round hole. Sometimes people don't need financial advice. They just need a nudge or a kick, and you can go and do that yourself.
That's a good point.
Go and do it that way, go and do it this way. And that's for me. Like, that's why I keep my fees as flexible as possible. If someone says, I don't think I need advice, but I could do with some help, I'll be like, okay, let's figure out what that help looks like, and I'll help you. And that could be just as valuable as somebody that you've just invested 4 million quid for.
If you had to say one was the problem over the other, would you say it was income problem or a spending problem?
That's a tough one to answer. I think it's a bit of both, but I'd almost kind of say there's a layer that comes before that, and it's an education problem. Okay. In that we don't know how to manage money. We're not taught how to manage money. We don't have conversations with people around managing our finances, managing a household budget, understanding your pay slip, understanding how much tax you pay, understanding that when you get your first job, and I bet you've done it because I did. I got my first paycheck when I paid tax, and I was like, great, I'm getting £1,000 this month. And you look at it and you've got like 820 quid. And you're like, who stole my £180? Because nobody told you were going to pay tax and national insurance. You weren't aware of that. But then you're like, I went to see my dad and I was like, what's that? What's this stuff? And he's like, oh, that's your tax and national insurance. I'm like, I don't want to pay that. And he's like, yeah, I haven't got a choice, sunshine. Do you know what I mean?
I don't want to pay it.
But it's like that, that's that education piece.
Yeah.
And that's so hard because, like, and I'm a big believer in this with some organizations that I work with. Like, your cognitive behavior as a kid is set by the age of 7. So the way you kind of perceive and manage money is more than likely set by the age of 7. And it's based on what your parents do. So it's very difficult to break that cycle and to look at other areas and try to step away from that. It's possible, but it's difficult.
That's so true.
But as a society, we've got a responsibility, and it's not just on the schools, it's as parents, as individuals, uncles, aunties, grandparents, whatever it is, to be able to help our kids understand this stuff, because we're in a world where there's so much noise about do this, do that, do the other, be a dropshipper, and you make 35 grand a month and drive a Ferrari. Really? And kids get sucked in by that, do you know what I mean? They get sucked in and kind of think, if I'm not doing that, I'm a failure. But it's the education piece. And I think if you're educated on how you manage your money, the saving then becomes a lot easier, and the investing then becomes a lot easier as well. But you've got to start at a foundational level first. You've got to have almost like a 5 out of 10 knowledge, if you like, to get started in that. And the vast majority of people are kind of going along with it too. And when you look at how big the banking industry is, how big marketing is, like, everything's designed to suck money out of your pocket. Like, look how clever adverts are. Like, how many adverts did you see on your way here this morning?
Probably hundreds.
And how many did you get on your phone and your social media that would just bang on what you wanted?
Yeah, it's scary.
It's crackers.
Yeah.
Like, it's getting, like, those industries are getting so successful and sucking that money out of your pocket. Like, you're really up against it to try and manage this stuff. But the tides are turning and things are changing. Like, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see this stuff in school and people will be taught about this. And there'll be like 1 or 2 things that you'll take from it and just follow you through your life. Like, and if those couple of snippets are enough to just get you by until you kind of start looking at it, and then I remember that. Like, that's so powerful.
It's useful. I think on the point of education, so you cleverly didn't answer the question, but no, but you're absolutely right. It does start beyond that.
Yeah.
And it is education. I think the education part is the patience. I think so often now the buzzwords, the sound bites are, make 10 grand a month by doing these 3 steps. Again, it might be possible. I'm sure it is for some people, but for me, it isn't. And I think there's that education in knowing that, investment is a patience. Investment is a patient thing. It's not an overnight thing. And certainly in the world that you're from, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is very much a case of put bits away for the future rather than wake up one day and see that you've hit the jackpot. That's key. I want to do something a little bit different on this episode. I would like to run through 3 categories of what I've selected, and if you can give me some top tips for those categories. Yeah. So the first is business owners. What should business owners be doing that could help?
Okay. So first of all, before you set the business up, you want to have a conversation with an accountant, a really good accountant. And most of them will give you some time for free. So they'll say, I'm setting up a business. This is what I'm thinking. What do I need to do? Because I see it so often that people set their companies up incorrectly, set the wrong company codes or whatever, hammered by tax, cause problems further down the line. That should be step number one. Once the business is kind of up and running, if you're using an accountant, you should be asking that accountant or find a financial advisor to have a conversation with. What else could be you doing? So as a business owner, there's a few things. You should be paying your pension out of your business if you can afford to do it and the business profits can do it, because you can offset that against your corporation tax. Whether you're paying 19% or higher, that saves against that. And that's you extracting wealth from the business into your pocket. Because ultimately, why did you set the business up in the first place? Was it a purpose-led business to help people? Yes, of course it was. You still got bills to pay, right? So you want to transfer that wealth from the business across to you. Another thing that you could be doing is looking at your life insurance, your critical illness cover, pay them through the business. And that's a real great one because the business could pay for it, which means it gets offset against your corporation tax. Now, just imagine that you'd paid for that out of your personal expenses. You would have paid your personal tax on that to start with as well. So you would have paid income tax or your dividend tax. So you've saved corporation tax, you've saved the personal and dividend tax as well. That could be you saving like 40 to 50%. Yeah. That's a big, big thing. And a lot of business owners don't do it. Every business owner I chat to now, I'm like, where's your life insurance? What are you doing? How much are you paying at your pension? And another thing that is a little bit more prevalent at the minute is I see a lot of businesses that have a lot of money in cash in their accounts, which is fine because actually you might have growth plans, all kinds of different stuff. But like in a personal account, if that money's been there for longer than 5 years and it's doing naff all for you, do something different with it. You could invest in a corporate investment because they exist. So your business could have an investment exactly like you did personally. That money potentially could be making something for you. I'm not saying do all of it, but some of it, and you could be getting those returns that we talk about in the stock market, 5%, 10%, 12%, even more if it's in the right fund. But have a conversation with a professional if you do it. And then every so often what you could do is take a lump out of that and feed your pension. And I think as financial advisors, we stay away from that corporate stuff so much, but it's so powerful. There's that conversation and finding what's right for you and fitting that all together like a jigsaw with your accountant and your financial advisors, massively important as a business owner.
New parents.
Awesome. So I've been there and done it 4 times. So
By the way, I'm getting free advice here because these are all things that are related
that's what
to
you
me.
think. You're getting an invoice on the way out. So new parents, it's a real minefield because it depends on the position that you're in financially. Like in an ideal world, yes, do you know what? You want to have some life insurance straight away. You want to make sure that if something happens to you, your child isn't going to be impacted if you're not here. Because financially, that can make a massive difference. And the good thing is, if you do it while you're relatively young, it's not going to cost you a load of money. We've all seen the adverts on TV, there's various providers or on social media that talk about this stuff. And everybody says, that's not going to happen to me. But have a think. How many times have you seen something on social media, one of your friends has put down with a parent has been diagnosed with something that's pretty horrific and we're doing a fundraiser for them. Now, I completely sympathise with this stuff because it's really difficult to go through that. But you could have done something about it. You could have had that conversation, had that life insurance set up so your kids don't have to worry about that stuff. You're not worrying about what's going to happen to them long term. You could set yourself up for university and all that kind of thing. Another thing, if you can afford to do, is some savings or investments for your kids. That's a big one. You can do a junior ISA for up to £9,000. That could be stocks and shares based, could be cash based. The money was then put away until the kids reach the age of 18. Now, if I was 18 and I had 18 years worth of £9,000 hit my pocket, I'd go wild. Now, that's one of the challenges I do have with that stuff is it's all about the education piece with your kids going through that process. Like when they're 18, you want them to understand this is for a deposit on a house, this is for university or whatever that is. It's that conversation education piece that goes with that $9,000. And another big one I talk to every client about is a pension. If you can afford to, set a pension up for your kids. Because if you can set a pension up for your kids, it's £2,880 is what you can put in.
Okay.
Tax relief on that, which takes it up to £3,600. If you got a return of 10% over the first 18 years of a kid's life, which is possible, by the time they're 18, they probably only need to contribute £100 a month for the rest of their life, and they would have an incredible pension. Yeah. Incredible. They'd be able to pack in work at 55.
Wow.
Done. Just because you set up a pension. Even if it's like 10, 20 quid, like when your grandparents are kind of
something.
It's massive.
Could you link the two together? Could business owners fund it from their business.
You can't fund it from the business, but you could fund it individually. But the way to think about it is it's free money because you get that tax relief on top, don't you? 2,880 goes in, you pay 2,880 in, 3,600 hits the pension. It's free money. And it makes such a difference long term. Like the vast majority of my clients now who've got kids, first thing on the agenda, have you got kids? Life insurance is really important, right? But have you thought about paying money into a pension? And they're like, didn't even know you could do it. Right? Well, you can. Every single one.
It's never even crossed my mind.
Worth doing. Even if it's a tenner, if it's 20 quid, 30 quid. Because by the time they get to 18, you're probably having a conversation with them about pensions. And as much as that's going to be an exciting conversation with an 18-year-old, actually what you're doing is you're setting them up for much further down the line.
Yeah.
Like I look back at it now and I'm like, imagine if my folks had done that. Like, imagine if your folks had done that as well. You'd be sat here and you'd be thinking, I'm not worrying about retirement because
I wouldn't be sat here.
Yeah. But I probably wouldn't be either. Or be having this conversation on a yacht in the Bahamas or something, wouldn't we? With gold-plated microphones, but that's another story. But yeah, like you'd be in such a strong financial position from just relatively humble starts, and that's how you build significant wealth, which goes back to one of your kind of earlier questions. It's just start early.
It's bothering. It's logic. And then finally, I see it a lot, which is, people unfortunately haven't prepared. They haven't planned for retirement, and it's around the corner.
Yeah.
What would you advise for them?
It's never too late. I've seen people start pensions in their 50s. Granted, that might not get you the retirement that you want, but it's going to be going something towards it. Don't just think because you're in your 50s or your late 40s that you can't get started. It's not enough. It's never too late because whatever you do will make a difference somewhere. But there's a reality part of it as well. Like you need to sometimes sit down and think, well, what is my retirement really going to look like? And phased retirement is very common now. Like my old man's doing it now. He packed in a long time ago, packed in the day job, but he works in like a conference centre in Newcastle. And I phoned him up a couple of weeks back. I was like, what have you been doing today? I've been serving ice cream all day. Loves it. Yeah. And it's like, it's a very different job when you're doing that for an extra bit of pocket money you have to pay for your holidays than it is a career. And sometimes that might be enough to keep you going. Some people do it just to keep themselves taken over mentally, but that might be enough on top of your state pension, on top of a private pension to just keep you going. But I think going back to what we talked about earlier, it's have the reality check of where you are now and where you want to get to and what's that gap. And if you've got a gap, how do you address it?
I've got a question for you. Do IFAs like property?
Oh, man.
I've had some conflicts in my career.
Yeah, I bet you have. Like when I was in banking, it was no. And you're in the big corporates, it's no, because you've got sales targets, you've got someone breathing down your neck saying if you don't hit your target, you're going to be on a performance plan, you've got to do
this. And I felt it. It's almost like we're both trying to pull the client in different directions.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes the client doesn't know which way to go. And I've seen it loads of times, and quite often the client will just do none of it. They'd be like, I can't make your mind up, I'm not going to do anything. Yeah. And 2 years later, they're in exactly the same position. Now, fundamentally, that's wrong because that client wants to make a difference to their life. So, yes, I think, dependent on how they run their business, if they are, in my experience, I guess, self-employed or they run their own firm, it's part of the bigger picture. Like, I talk to clients all the time and say, the more you've got pushing in that direction of what that North Star in the sky is, the quicker you're going to get there. And the more chance you've got of hitting that goal. Because if one of them doesn't work, you've got another 2, 3, 4, 5 things kind of pushing in that direction. So personally, it's part of a massive bigger picture. And if a client says to me, I'm thinking about investing with property, I'll be like, great, tell me about it. Tell me what you want to do. Tell me how you want to do it. Tell me what it looks like. How can I help you do that? Because that's how it should be. Yeah. It's the big picture stuff. It's not the, I'm going to try and convince that client not to put money into property.
It's a selfish perspective, isn't it?
Which a lot of people do, right?
Yeah.
Try and convince you not to do that because I want to get paid and I want that money in a pension with me. Like, that approach is so backwards. Do the right thing for your client and talk about the bigger picture stuff because guess what? That will come back to you in buckets and spades compared to taking the first approach.
Is being poor a choice?
Oh, man. You're going to get me right.
Set you off.
No, and I know why you asked that because I did a post on this like last week, right? And I saw another financial advisor in another industry, post this on another platform. He said, poor is a choice.
Right.
What a crock. And I'm like, that boiled my blood because I think, let's be honest, right? Me and you sat here and kind of having this conversation in a nice kind of place in London. We're privileged. We're privileged to be in the position that we're in. We're privileged to be in a position where we've been born by our parents into a house, into not being in poverty. Like, being
so many little things that we take for granted.
like huge. And I was thinking about this on the way down, having a conversation with a couple of your mates about this, and one of your mates was like, oh, well, I grew up with nothing and I've kind of done this and I've built a business. And I'm like, yeah, but you had a mum who ran a business. You had a mum who ran a business, who had a mortgage, who owned a house. So you've kind of started, you've had internet, you've had stuff like that. Like, my other half works in education. She has worked in education, and she's seen some real ends of the other scale. And she worked for a national children's charity, and you saw kids that haven't got anything. Like, kids that can't afford a coat at winter, kids that can't afford to kind of do their school homework because they haven't got internet at home, who get one school meal a day. Now, you can't tell me that that's a choice. Like, those parents are choosing for those kids to be poor and not have a school meal. Like, there's, even in this country, there's massive inequality just in England and Wales and the UK. Like, put that out globally, there's a massive difference, man. It's huge. Like, being poor is not a choice. It's you're a victim of circumstance and opportunity on a lot of occasions. As much as people say, oh, don't play the victim card, sometimes that's all you've got. Like, it's very hard to dig yourself out of it. Like, if I've got mates that have been through the care system, that's brutal.
Yeah.
And some of them have been in some really horrible positions, but like, it's not a choice at all. Like, all this information's available to you, but you've got to have the means to find it, right? You've got to be able to afford to have the internet. You've got to be able to afford to have something to look at the internet on. The reality is, some people can't afford that.
Glad we've cleared that up, because that was naturally spiraling, and it's something that, again, a lot of people feel strongly towards. But you also hear the other side of it, which I think you're so out of touch. You know, you're so tone deaf. It leads us on to anyone who's feeling overwhelmed about their financial situation. What would you typically say, Ian?
It's perfectly normal. Everybody feels overwhelmed by the finances, and especially in this country, we've got this, I guess, belief that it's rude to talk about money. It's not rude to talk about money. And I think that kind of...
It's only good to talk about money if you've got loads of it, right?
But then it's seen as rude and crass, and you're like, oh, look at this tosspot talking about how much money they've got and all the rest of it. You know what I mean? And I've seen people like that all the time. You've met them as well.
Yeah.
And like, we move in those kind of circles where you see that kind of stuff. But like, talking about money's not rude at all. You need to be able to talk about this stuff. And if you feel overwhelmed by it, that's normal. Like, I feel overwhelmed by it. Like, just last week, I was overwhelmed by like how much money's coming into the business. It's not where I want it to be. And I'm kind of sitting there thinking about what's going to happen next week and what's going to happen next month. And that's the reality of it. Like, everybody gets overwhelmed by money.
Really honest, yeah.
And the reality of it is, you need to kind of work yourself through it. And there's no quick fixes for this stuff. There's no like instant, wake up tomorrow and I'm out of 10 grand worth of debt. It's a structured plan. And to be self-reflective enough to think, I can dig myself out of this. And I haven't seen any financial position where you can't dig yourself out of it. And it might take years to get yourself out of it, but you will get out of it. And I do some work with the men's mental health charity, and we talk about things like suicide and all the rest of it. And sadly in January, when tax returns are due, it's one of the biggest months for people committing suicide.
Wow. Because
they can't afford the tax return and they take their own life because of money. Like, that's incredibly sad.
Yeah.
Like, there's ways out of this stuff. And ultimately, it's difficult. It's painful through that process. But by realizing the situation that you're in, having a conversation with something that could be Citizens Advice, who are a great charity, that could be Christians Against Poverty, who are a great charity as well, someone in a bank, somebody who knows about finances, a family friend, whoever, having a conversation with someone is the first point, because you're sharing that burden. Then it's figuring out what a structured plan is and going back to that thing of think with ink and just write down how you can get out of it. Sound off with somebody. Like, talk to somebody about it. You're not in this alone. We are all, and everybody's faced financial difficulty at some point in life. I have. 100% I have. And I will do again.
Yeah.
It's normal. We need to normalize this stuff, because the more we normalize it, the more we talk about it, and the more that help's going to be available for people.
And then finally, Ian, have you noticed a change post-COVID towards the attitude regarding finances?
Like a monumental shift.
Good, bad?
Bit of both.
Okay.
And I think it kind of came about because we were all sat at home. Like, my business took off of COVID. And if you talk to a will writer or an estate planner, their business took off as well. And the reason it took off is that we all had a reminder of that, of our own mortality, because everybody will probably know somebody who's died of COVID or it's been affected by it one way or another. And it was that reality check of like, listen, we're not here forever. But I think the reality is we all had a bit of time to sit down and look at our finances and take a reality check of where we are. And again, I'm speaking from a position of privilege. There are families out there who lost jobs and have some really horrific circumstances and food banks and all the rest of it to be able to kind of just get by every month. I think for me, it was the reality check of seeing both extremes of that spectrum and seeing just how some of these people at the lower end just struggle to get by every day, right the way to the top end where people have just had a great old time. And I was incredibly fortunate that we had the kids at home. So we had all 4 kids at home for the best part of, a year and a half or however long it was. Like, to me, that was an incredible experience that I'm never going to get back. But kind of going back to your finances, I think the vast majority of people would have been at home and then started realizing, assuming, of course, that you've got the same kind of pay, how much money you piss away every month. Like, how much money are you spending on a coffee? How much money you spend on a beer after work, on a takeaway, all that kind of stuff. I talk about this stuff on social media all the time. But the reality of it is, without all of that additional spending, a lot of people were in a position where the savings balances have gone up. Like, if you look at some of the stats from the Bank of England, the savings balances, and I can't remember the exact figures, went up like astronomically over COVID because people weren't spending that level of money. Yeah. And there was a great thing that I posted about. Have I posted that? I might be coming anyway, so I'll kind of probably tee this one up. It's like, if during COVID, if you got through COVID and you'd always been thinking, oh, I haven't got the time to sort your finances out, and you've got through COVID and you still haven't sorted your finances out, time was never the problem. Because you had the time. Did you fix it? And we all had that opportunity, right? Did we fix our finances in that period of time? Only you can answer that.
I'm not going to add to that. That's a powerful note to end on. Ian, you've touched on mental health a couple of times during this episode.
Yeah.
I know that there's something that's really dear to you that you're working on.
Yeah.
Feel free to share it.
Of course. So I'm a trustee of a men's mental health charity called Man Up. Okay. I've been involved with that for since the start of the year. The guy who runs it set the mental health charity up 3 years ago. Started off as a one-off event. It just became did another event, then it became a registered charity, and it's just gone from strength to strength. And we're challenging the conversations around men's mental health in particular, because we all see the stats. Suicide's a problem, men's mental health's an issue. We don't talk about it enough. We're a signposting charity. We don't offer direct support, but what we do is challenge those conversations, and we do a lot of work on social media. So after this, I'm going down to Piccadilly to film with a company we've got a partnership with, to film in boots talking about men's mental health, and I'm excited to do it. I'm incredibly proud to be part of it and challenge that conversation and change how we talk about this stuff, and kind of linking back to what we've talked about today. Money's a big part of that as well. Money's a big part of your mental health. We need to talk about money, and we need to talk about our mental health more. Amazing.
Well, look, Ian, I've thoroughly enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for joining me. Thanks so much for watching. Tune in for the next episode. Ian, thank you so much.
Love that, mate.
Thank you very much.
Cracking. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on, pal.